Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, I have maybe a controversial topic. I don't know. We'll see. But why 2 out of 5 new CEOs fail? That's right. 40% of new CEOs fail. Interesting stat. I've never heard that before, but I have an amazing guest with me who's ready to unpack that and hopefully give us some new tips on how to lower that number. Let's make new CEOs successful. And for small business owners too, these principles will absolutely apply as you grow and scale your own company. We'll take the corporate model, see what works there, and bring it down to our businesses. But I'd like to welcome in David Roche to the show. Thank you for being here and welcome in.
Thank you for having me on the show. Nice to be here, Brandon.
So this is an exciting, well, maybe not exciting. It's an interesting topic about failure and a really high failure rate. I would think 40% of CEOs fail. For the audience, though, when you say that number, just give us some context. What are the sizes of those business revenue, employees, whatever metric you want to use? But let's figure out where that 40% is coming from first.
I mean, two things. One, the 40% I picked up. It was an article in the Harvard Business Review. The references, the author, the original author, the references are in my book, which I'm sure we'll mention. But but as I say, I saw it in the Harvard Business Review, and it jumped out at me that 2 out of 5 new CEOs fail and are gone within the first 18 months of their tenure. And being such a commonplace problem, that's the answer to your question of what size. And I think the answer is every size. I mean, McKinsey actually came up with a number on the basis that a lot of this is to do with transition, poorly managed transitions, and we'll come on to talk about that. But McKinsey came up with a number that said that across Standard & Poor's 1,500 companies, they reckon that $1 trillion is lost in value every year on the back of poorly managed transitions for CEOs and C-suite appointments. And so that says to me that one, it happens everywhere. It's incredibly commonplace. And two, it's remarkable that this is not, number one on everyone's agenda when it comes to any sort of succession planning.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm also thinking, okay, so 40% you said within 18 months, that kind of lines up with the small business failure rate. I think as small business owners where we've made this our career, our livelihoods, we tend to stick it out a little bit longer. So instead of going out of business in 18 months, I think the failure rate I've seen is 50% fail in the first. I think I've seen in the first year. Don't quote me on that stat, but and then up to 80% fail in the first 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, startups is slightly different to the area that I focus on. In that startups, there's two things. One, you're going to have some people who just had an idea and really don't know what they're doing, and then they crash and burn fairly quickly. But two, the ones who are good, and you've seen this with digitization of industries. I come from the publishing world, and a lot of independent bookstores went to the wall when digital publishing and ebooks really took off. But the beauty of being an independent and a startup and a self-owned company is, in one way, it's a beauty and a beast as well. Is that you're ruled by cash flow, and if something isn't working, you don't have the luxury of saying, let's see how that goes, and we'll put in some plans and do some research and maybe, see how it goes, and maybe hire someone further down the road when we can afford it to sort that out. You have to change tomorrow because your cash is going to run out. When your cash runs out, you're gone. So that urgency does bring a slightly different perspective to action that corporates may not have, and therefore the lingering death is is potentially there. The I do think corporate is slightly different because um, everyone climbs up the ladder within corporate, and to the Peter principle famously said that everyone's promoted to the point of respective incompetence.
I was just gonna say that. It just popped in my head.
Where basically, if you're really good at your job, you may have specialist skills, and then you move on to the next job for which you're not so skilled or qualified or experienced. And if you succeed in that, then you get another promotion. Basically, you'll go on until you're no longer competent at your job. And if you stretch that to its nth degree, then everybody is comfortably situated in a job for which they're not qualified or competent at doing, which is not the greatest model. I mean, I think you take that with a slight pinch of salt, but that point about specialists and generalists is interesting. I think specialists do need assistance with general management skills when they're promoted. And you used to see it in engineering and chemicals companies and whatever, that the technicians would best at their job in a technical sense would be promoted into management. But I think the other side of it, and this is really important for this success as a CEO, is that general managers, generalists, tend to think, hang on, have I got the specialist skills I need to be able to talk with authority and lead this business? But actually, what they don't understand is as you go up the ladder, being a generalist is in itself is a specialist skill. And it's absolutely critical that you are the conductor that brings in all parts of the team into play and coordinates everything in a way that a specialist it doesn't necessarily have the skills to do. So I think that's really important, and I think that when you're in in line for, say it's an internal appointment in a company, there's sort of like there's responsibility on both sides. One, on the boss's side is to make sure that you're building for success rather than failure, and you're building with trust, because you often see in a short list, you might well have everyone has a similar experience and background, and actually probably most people on that short list can do the job and have a reasonable chance of succeeding. The real question that the bosses have is, can they be trusted to do the job? And so as an internal candidate, that either works for you or works against you. But that's the real key, which is why it's important those people aspiring to be a CEO from the internal side, if they're really good at what they do, they need to be building their own succession plan for who's coming in behind them, just as importantly, because if it's 50-50 between the internal candidate who runs a absolutely hot department that delivers incredibly well, and an outsider who can come in without disturbing what might happen behind, in terms of backfilling that important person internally, it might well go to the external person, because again, I don't want to move that person internally, because there might be a cost to doing so. So always have your success. You don't think that having a successor identified is going to risk your job. It actually risk your ability to not having one, risk your ability to be promoted as well. So there's responsibility on all sides. I think with the people making the appointment, as I say, there's so much focus on the choice of the person that transition that happens beyond it really is a secondary thought. Is that what transition is there in terms of preparing the company, particularly the senior leadership team that the CEO is coming into, for that. If it's an external appointment, that's really important. And how much truth and honesty is said about the culture and whatever the CEO's coming into. And there's some extraordinary statistics about CEOs being surprised at the financial state of the company, less surprised because they can see a lot of that in terms of the documents that's shared with them, but it's the softer skills and situations and culture around the company that they're surprised about. Um, and that relationship between board and CEO is a very different relationship to anything the individual will have had before. They've had a one-to-one reporting line. Now they're one-to-many in terms of who they report into. They report to the chair, but they also report to other members of the board, and how they manage that, the relationships at that level, as well as the relationships with their senior leadership team, some of whom may be sitting there going, I should have got the job rather than you. Others who may be actually, they've been on their last chance saloon, they've been in the last chance saloon for some while, and they see this as, oh my God, I got another chance to redeem myself. So they're the nicest, most helpful people, but it's all a little bit of a mirage because they're yesterday's person. And then managing that responsibility across a company where instead of a departmental responsibility, suddenly everyone from the post room to the receptionist to legal to whatever it might be is as important as each other, and how they interlink. And it's a very different game from the one they played before. And I think that anyone aspiring, again, as you're coming up the ladder, you need to be showing that curiosity about other departments and how everything integrates and interdependencies as you go up the ladder. And also in that trust thing, ask your boss what their biggest problem is, and say, I'm going to become an expert and look after that. Or when it comes to, can you be trusted to do the job, that's the sort of thing that goes, oh my God, this is the dream person you want working for you or leading the company, because they take on the difficult things, and they didn't know necessarily anything about them before, but they've grasped it, learnt it, and solved, and they're a problem solver. How you position yourself in these relationships is really critical. Then also there's the external relationships within the industry, with the trade press and with national press if it's appropriate, about how you position yourself. And that's often how the company's perceived. And that'll make the difference between whether you can hire the best talent in the industry to come and work for you or your company, rather than just the company. If you think of the inspirational leaders, the Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, or whatever, there's lots of people who would go and work for their organizations on the back of them, rather than necessarily the company that they work for.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different points there that you touched on. I'm curious though, the big number that you mentioned in the beginning of this episode was $1 trillion in estimated losses. Where do you think the bulk of that will come from in a transition? Like what's making up that $1 trillion loss?
I think it's several things. It's first and foremost the company. The person isn't sacked for succeeding, so the company performance is not what it's expected to be. That it'd be nice for companies to have a bounce, but if you're coming after a long-serving, successful, possibly a founder who's been in situ for many years, then you're not necessarily going to have a bounce out of that. But this fixation. There's a fixation on the 100-day plan, which is slightly unfair for a new CEO, because a lot of this transition stuff means that I'm building something firmer where we're, as a team, going to work together. We all buy into the new mission, whatever it might be, as opposed to I'm firefighting here, I'm firefighting there, I'm sacking this, I'm hiring here. Really interesting. There's I'm slightly deviating from the question, but I think this is interesting. There's a slight cognitive dissonance between two viewpoints when you ask CEOs to look back at what they might have done differently, because they often say, particularly going into a slightly different company or industry, I wish I'd listened more, so that I've taken into account things. So when I come up with a strategy, I know pretty much that this is going to be signed off by everybody, and everyone's going to engage with it and drive it, because I've done my homework. I've talked to enough people and I've built trust by listening to people's views. Um, but then, but then on the other side, they also say, "I wish I'd trusted my intuition more," and that we didn't move fast enough necessarily. Um, the one thing that people tend to do is make changes within their senior leadership team quite early, and actually that's always seen as something positive when people are looking back. Sometimes maybe a bit earlier, but that's not the issue. It's trusting their own intuition. I sort of knew that was the case. I guess there's a difference between saying I know it's the case just from a hunch before I started with the company, and I ignored the feedback that I've been listened to. But there is some dissonance between those two. Then there's the performance of the company in the first 18 months. Then there's the hiring time. Then there's the hiring again. So presumably that performance of the company doesn't actually correct itself 36 months or more on the basis of the influence of the new CEO anyway. But there's also that. I mean, on the personal basis, the hiring cost and the ability to hire and the ability to retain staff. As soon as there's a wobble within a senior leadership team, other companies are in like sharks to get the best people there to say, "Are you happy there? You've been passed over once for a CEO role there. It looks like you're going to be passed over again because it hasn't been given to you. They're going outside again. We can offer you a fantastic package and a better prospect." So you can use your best staff, and I mean the cost of recruitment is enormous anyway. So I one CEO I in the financial services, it cost £180,000 to sterling to recruit him, and why the every support you need a CEO might need isn't given to them. I don't know. So for me, a professional and most importantly independent coach and mentor, it seems absolutely obvious that you would give them, so that this person actually has someone in the form of a coach as a soundboard to bounce things off, as a mirror, but also as a mentee, so that the obvious mistakes and the idiot questions you feel it's too late to ask are still in play. And say that person costs 20 grand or something for 6 months or a year. Doesn't really matter. 20 grand against 180 grand is a cheap insurance scheme to try and provide every opportunity for that CEO to succeed. And that's the question. And in the new CEO's mind, everyone, it's a 7 or 8 out of 10 new leaders have some doubts about their own ability. And this may be imposter syndrome at one end of the scale to just some reason for that. I'm more worried about the 2 out of 10 who have no doubts. I think they're the outliers. It's slightly strange. And that's if you think about what that means, you come in, you've got this political game. You've got all this new territory that you're not used to working with in terms of the scope of your role. You put on a mask which says, "I am supremely confident. I am hugely experienced. This is not a problem." And so everyone looks at you, takes that at face value, and says, "Great, we've hired well as the board. Great, we've hired well. We'll leave them to it. Fantastic." And the company is sitting there going, "Gosh, they look like they don't need any help. I'm not going to offer too much or ask any questions because this person looks like they don't need it or they won't welcome it." So you've got that double down effect of, "I'm a bit anxious. I could do with some help and some honest conversations, but actually no one's going to open up to me because I don't look like I want them."
Yeah, that's interesting. I agree with you. The 2 out of 10 are probably more scary than those ones who do doubt
Yeah.
to some degree their ability or what they're doing. Very interesting
Yeah,
dynamics.
we,
Well,
we, we had a prime minister for 49 days last year that showed a great example of that.
I can't speak to that as I am not caught up on international politics, but I can tell you at the time at least this episode airs, we have a new president here in the United States. Hasn't been inducted just yet, but yeah, interesting times all aboard, and we'll see how that goes. I think a lot of those principles that you're talking about carry over to that role, and also I mentioned our audience is predominantly small business owners and entrepreneurs. The same thing
Right.
applies when you are the leader of a company. Like you have to invest in your own success and have someone in your corner so you can ask those stupid questions, as David said, because that's
Uh,
the only way that we're all going to get better.
yeah, I mean, being able to ask the question, having that immense trust that someone is unconditionally on your team for you is so critical, rather than has an agenda that actually is for their own career or for whatever other reason. And I think with small businesses, you know, you either grow these skills in a way you don't have that sudden immersion that you get if you've made a corporate CEO for the first time. But you know it might be more like being under the frog in boiling water in that you don't really understand at what point you should escape or learn. And but it's just as crucial you build those skills. And in a lot of cases with that specialist generalist thing that happened that we talked about earlier, you know, sometimes it is best that a CEO is brought in to run the company and you carry on in a slightly different guy's chair or chief development officer or whatever it might be. You know, that can work as a model, but knowing when that moment is really tough. Really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's so much more to unpack here, and this was a great episode. David, you said earlier you wrote a book. Where can people find out more about you and pick up a copy of your book?
Okay, the book is called Become a Successful First Time CEO, and it's available on Amazon. So it's published in the UK, but it's available on Amazon.com as well. Uh, and probably orderable from bookshops as well. And there's an audio book and an ebook version as well. And yes, you've got on Brandon's side of the screen is grayareacoaching.com, which is the website for the coaching business that I have. And there's lots of information there and contact details and under the media tab, lots of interviews and specific articles and stuff. So loads of stuff there.
Fantastic. All right. Yes, all of that, link to the book, link to the website down in the show notes below, wherever you're watching or listening. David, thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation.
Thanks, Brandon. I really enjoyed it.
And for those of you watching, listening, we appreciate having you too. Make sure you go subscribe. We love putting out these episodes every single day of the week to help you grow your business, adopt a new mindset, get out of the box you find yourself in, whatever it is, help you build a more harmonious business and life. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch.